Good morning. I went to the pub on Saturday morning, as I always do, and lately I only have a coffee, and I have a chat with a Chinese man that I met there who comes from Hong Kong, and he's very interesting to me. It's a bit difficult to understand him because he has a very strong accent. But he's a highly educated man, and he makes some very interesting observations to me. And I think he's a believer. He attends a church near where he lives, and somewhat whether he works there also. I think there may be some work connection. I'm not completely sure. He might be doing voluntary work, but he's not. He doesn't speak much about the Bible, but he certainly seems to know what's written in there to some extent. And he's given me some great insights about Hong Kong itself. And he's lived in many parts of the world, working in merchandising. And in Britain, he does a very humble job, cleaning the pub and working a few hours. He's just an interesting man to me. As far as I know, he's completely alone here. I don't really, I don't know the details, but he seems to be. He's probably in his mid-50s, I'm going to guess. I'm not sure. It's very difficult to gauge. Maybe he's younger than that. Certainly younger than me. And so if you ever listen to this, hello there, why? I always enjoy chatting. And as I was sitting at the table after he'd left or before he arrived, I noticed a man of my people, of approximately my age, who was walking, who'd become transfixed and was just stopped in the middle of the room. The pub is very empty at that time in the morning. And he was transfixed by the television. And I looked, the television is just constantly on, although the sound is off, thankfully. And it will sometimes catch my eye, but I generally don't bother looking at it. And I tried to see what had transfixed him on the television. Now you see somebody looking at something, it's automatic, isn't it, to turn your gaze, to try to spy the thing that is observed. And there was a series of ravaged city photographs or video footage showing ruins and damage done by bombs and all the rest of it to some place, whether it would be I don't know, maybe it was the Ukraine, or maybe it was Palestine, or one of these places that they say that's what happens. And he was just transfixed by these images, which are images that I won't look at all because they're just designed to be harrowing. There's no point in looking at them. You can do nothing anyway, even if they were real. But, people find them so compelling that this man was literally mesmerized there by watching these visions of destruction. And of course, his belief in those things will shape his faith, as it were, whatever faith he has. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's, an atheist, but atheists have faith also of a certain description. Of course, we all have. We all walk by faith, by some fundamental belief. You can describe it as a faith, actually, because nothing can be proven, you see, of these things. But, why are people so why do people so readily accept these images as being truth? This is the problem. People just accept that is the truth, that they are real images being shown. Well, perhaps they are. I mean, I can't say that they're not. But there's certainly, if you research in the news media and coverage of wartime events, you will soon begin to uncover the fact that a great deal of theatre is involved in these things, and careful preparation. And scenes are, well, you could say recreated, but perhaps they're created the first time. So the veracity of wartime pictures, once you've seen a few that are clearly photoshopped and edited, and once you've seen mannequins being dressed up to look like dead people, and all the rest of that stuff, which gets very quickly removed from YouTube, I suppose, but I mean, it's there on the internet for anybody who wants to seek diligently. I think, you have to be a little bit skeptical. It was openly admitted. I mean, the BBC were involved in the Northern Ireland Troubles, which is another kind of a war, which was fomented between the British and the Irish, or the Catholics and the Protestants, I think, or heaven knows what it was meant to be about, and it was called the Troubles. But it was known that the BBC crews would go over to Ireland and round up a few lads and give them some money and have them pose with weapons and with balaclavas to get their story and recreate a scene. I mean, people were caught doing this. That was in the early days, but that would have been, I suppose, in the 1960s, 1970s, was it? But that's how it's done. That's how news is done. It's always been that way. For the Second World War, for the newsreels, the First World War, the newsreels. As soon as there was the ability to communicate these things by either through film theatres, movie theatres, or through particularly by television, then that became the narrative, of course, and so it had to be very carefully moulded and controlled. My views of these things obviously are very cynical, and people could say, well, no, you're going too far in your assumptions that just because one or two may have been these real, there are terrible things occurring and all the rest of it. But we have no real way of proving that and of finding that out. So, I started to think about the way that we are somewhat mesmerized by the information that is distributed. It is a risk that we can fall into. And I think it was related, but at the moment I can't see in what way, but I'm sure it might occur to me. Some years ago, I encountered the poem High Flight, written by Magee. His name is Magee. I forget John Magee, is it? There's another name, but it's a poem written by supposedly a wartime pilot in the Second War in 1941. He was in the Canadian Air Force, and he was involved in test flights of high altitude aircraft. Yes, this is to do with, of course, the veracity of reporting of war. And he'd written a sort of a poem praising, I suppose, the tremendous power of the aircraft that he was flying. I don't know what it was at the moment. I think it was a fighter, of a tactical aircraft of some type, and obviously it had, advanced technical features for its time. And these pilots, the Air Force has always been the elite squadron, has it not? And there's a reason for that, and I'll get into that. I'll just read the poem, just in case somebody doesn't have it. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth, and danced the skies on laughter silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless holes of air. up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where neither lark nor ever eagle flew, and while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. So that's High Flight by Magee, 1941. It's a very blasphemous poem if you think about what's being said here. This is the attempt, to reach God through our own endeavours. And here he is claiming, of course it's metaphorical perhaps, but I mean there is this sense, isn't there, that certainly in the field of flight, it's very closely connected to the adversary, this purposeful flight to heaven. And isn't it curious that from the Air Force, the air forces of the world, came the space agency, which flies even higher, we are told. So that's one aspect. But when you think about the elite squadrons in the Air Force, you couldn't just join the Air Force in this country, as far as I remember. I don't think that's true of any country. I mean, to be accepted into the Air Force is quite an achievement. It really is the crack sort of force, above the Navy. The Air Force is the elite part of the armed forces, I think, in all countries. These were Canadian pilots. He was a Canadian pilot, the author of this poem, but I think he was living and flying in Britain. I'm not sure about it. Britain, probably, yes. They are the elite, you see. So to become an elite in the armed forces, you have to be extremely obedient. You have to be very good. Perhaps you're chosen. Perhaps they already know who's going to be in that group. I don't know about that, but certainly you would have to be absolutely. Your allegiance would have to be unquestioning, wouldn't it? And perhaps some form of test would be arranged to prove that. Because you see, then the information that you have. You see, these high-flying pilots, they know that the Earth isn't a spinning ball because they've seen it from a height where this just isn't feasible. They haven't seen the fisheye curves that everybody else is shown. They've seen the flat horizons. So these people, they are part of they're inducted into the system somehow. And, if there's any Air Force pilots listening to it, I don't mean to make any disrespect to you. I mean, these people are, of course, courageous and all the rest of it. And perhaps they've done, perhaps they have saved the lives of people. I just don't know about it. I have no way of proving it. It's interesting, in the Second War, the pilots really, they were kind of young gentlemen, weren't they? They usually came from moneyed families, I think, many of them. And they were somewhat toffs, as it were, quite upper class young men, living a very gay and carefree lifestyle. And then supposedly shooting one another down in the skies above Britain, the Germans against the British. But the German pilots and the British pilots really have far more in common with one another than they did with the mass of the people in their own respective countries. And I'm just very doubtful that, they tried to machine gun one another out of the sky. They were involved, presumably, in some kind of, ritual or exercise. But the idea of planes, machine gunning here and there, it seems to me to be, because there's this idea of honor in the skies as well, isn't there? It's very interesting concepts. I can't prove any of these things. What do I know? maybe everything is as we're told it is, but the fact of the matter is that it takes place in the air, so it can't be, it's not subject to any kind of a skeptical observer, is it? You can't kind of be hiding behind a tree and see the scene, as it were, because you would have to be up in the air, probably at great height. So it's the ideal place for deception. And that's how it works, isn't it? This is how the space agencies work. They can't really prove the things that they're saying, but you can't disprove them because they happen in a space that is outside of your ability to go there, to be there. You just can't, it's a different world, as it were, already. And mere mortals can't go there. You would have to be a military pilot to get up to any kind of decent height, and you don't get to be a military pilot if you're somebody like me, or maybe somebody else who's listening here. I don't know. You have to be made of different metal, don't you, somehow? So that's right. It's the deception, you see. I mean, if we think about it in rational terms, bombs launched from the sky. I mean, how many 500-pound bombs would it take upon your city in order to reduce it to absolute submission? I suspect one would be fine if that were the true thing that's being done. A plane unleashing a deadly piece of, a deadly weapon, a missile of some description that hits the ground and explodes and fragments in any kind of a crowded place, would kill enough people that there would be no question that the population would risk a repeat occurrence of that, would there? That would be enough. We'll do what you say. Sorry we've upset you, whatever it is. It doesn't really make sense, does it? This continual bombing and bombing and bombing into submission, as it were. It seems to me that it may be narrative. It may be narrative, and to some extent, I believe that high flight confirms my suspicions about this. I read it to an elder in the church when I discovered it, who came to my house, and I sort of excitedly showed him this poem, and I gave it as a support for my interest in cosmology, and tried to reveal to him the sacrilegious nature of the poem. And he just didn't respond at all. He didn't seem to grasp what I was getting at. Maybe it's an intellectually difficult concept. I don't know, but it seems to me very clear. And the poem is revered. If you look it up online, you'll find it's actually inscribed on the Challenger space. What is the Challenger? I don't know. Space vehicle. The one Challenger the Challenger 13 memorial. Apparently, it's inscribed on that. Which again, we're in the realm of theatre, because if you've looked into the Challenger 13, you've probably found the videos that show that of the crew, most of the crew have been identified as being still strangely alive and well in a future life. These are conspiracy theories. I hope YouTube doesn't strike me off for saying them. I mean, they're out there, aren't they? God bless everybody.